So welcome to today's podcast. It's I'm Howell, and I'm a minister here at Yate Parish, and I'm with Gail. Say hello, Gail.
Hello there. I'm Gail, and I'm the curate here in Yate.
Today we're going to be talking about how Mary felt when the angel came to see her.
The dangers of the journey to Bethlehem.
We'll talk about how all babies cry.
And finally, we're going to talk about how the Victorians ruined the Christmas story.
Nothing controversial then.
Nothing controversial, I promise you.
Oh, tidings of comfort and joy. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy.
So this is our third podcast for Comfort and Joy, and last week, if you want to catch up with that, Ian and Gail talked about the light shining in the darkness and the prophecies of Isaiah looking towards God coming at Christmas in the person of Jesus. And if you're really far behind, you can play the catch up. It's just like Netflix, this really. You can listen to Howell and me and Joanne talking about the promise of God from the beginning in Genesis, and we'll be referencing that talk a bit in this podcast, because it's in this podcast where that promise made to Eve at the beginning of the Bible is actually fulfilled in the person of Mary. So today we'll be talking about the angel coming to see Mary, the beginning of the nativity play, where you have the cute kid all dressed up in white, saying hello to Mary and asking her to have God's son. We'll be talking about Jesus' birth and the journey to Bethlehem, and two carols, the angel Gabriel and Away in a Manger. So we're discussing them as well. So I'm here today with Gail. Hiya, Gail, all right?
Hiya, how are you?
All right, not too bad. Ready for this? So, Gail, it's always awkward for a bloke talking about the Annunciation, because you just can feel the complaints coming in, really. Do you know what I mean? So, it's true, isn't it? What does he know about birth,
Absolutely. What do you know about childbirth?
Well, I was there twice, but I wasn't in it. Just about. I was there, but it wasn't as painful for me, even though my hand got crushed a bit. But I'm not saying anything more about that before I get into serious trouble. So the Annunciation. What does that word mean, and what's the story then, Gail, of the Annunciation?
So the Annunciation is when the angel Gabriel comes to Mary and tells her, as a 13-year-old girl or thereabouts, that she's going to have a baby and that it's going to be God's son. Now, I'm not sure about anybody else, but if at 13 somebody had come to me, an angel had come to me and said, you're going to have a baby and it's going to be God's son, I might have been a bit frightened, a bit scared. But Mary was greatly troubled, it says here, just greatly troubled. I might have used other words. But also she was a virgin, so how can that be? She must have been thinking, this I must be dreaming this can't be true. This can't be true. And in fact, the bit of the reading we didn't hear in the carol service is the bit where the angel says to Mary, well, look, your cousin Elizabeth, who's really old and couldn't have a baby, is pregnant as well. And because they probably live so far away, Mary might not yet have had the news that Elizabeth was 6 months pregnant. And so, at that time, it must have really sunk in. That must have been the time when she said, oh, do you know what? This is true. I am going to have a baby.
Yeah, and I think with the word angel, greatly troubled, what that word means. I know when... Sadly, Paul has left the parish now, and he's gone down somewhere down South Bristol. I can't remember exactly where now. But he gave these books, these big, massive books, which is dictionary of, what's it called now? New International Dictionary of New Testament Theology. Remember those big, massive books? Yeah. Yeah, I just looked them on my bookshelf to have a look. And what you do in those books is you can look up what words mean in the Bible to give a fuller explanation of things. And the word that's translated as deeply troubled literally means that her guts were wrenched with fear. But it's translated as, it means it's the same word that they use a couple of times in the New Testament where something dramatic happens. So it's a kind of like jelly stomach, as it were, when you're really, really sort of frightened.
Yeah.
So, but there isn't an English word that can do that, is there really?
Well, no, but actually, when you say that, that makes it more real, doesn't it? And I think sometimes when we listen to the Christmas story, it's so lovely. It's a great story about Mary and Joseph. They go up to Bethlehem. They have this wonderful birth, and you hear this story, and it's so lovely. But actually, behind the story are the real guts, aren't they? It must have been a trauma for them. It must have been really dramatic, I think.
Yeah, and I think the other weird thing is the word angel just means messenger. So in our hymn, our carol is the angel Gabriel from heaven came. His wings have drifted snow, his eyes of flame. All hail, said he, for Emmanuel foretold, and all that one. Is we have this image of an angel as this, like we see in pictures, these massive wings, big sort of fiery eyes and things like that. But I like to think of it sometimes as a messenger. We have other angels in the Bible, like the ones that come to see Abraham, where they're just ordinary people. They're just ordinary.
So that makes sense to me. And I was doing a bit of research on the Angel Gabriel song, and it was an ancient Basque folk song from the 13th century. And it wasn't until the Victorian age that Sabine Baring Gould added that line, sort of paraphrased it and added that line, his wings as drifted snow, his eyes as flame, to fit the Victorian idea of what the angels were.
It's always the Victorians, isn't it? You look at anything, It's all changed. Everything changed in the Victorian times, the coronation, everything. Our world is Victorian. That's the trouble. But yeah, it's not, but it's so deep in our culture, this idea of those sort of angels. All the pictures are like that. But I often like to think of it as like some bloke or some woman came up and sort of said to her, oh, by the way, you're going to have God's son. And she sort of goes, well, that's impossible. And then makes that promise of you can go and see your cousin Elizabeth. And that's why I think sometimes she goes to see Elizabeth to kind of check out whether it's true. So maybe she thought, well, I'll say yes to God, but I want to check it out a bit as well and find out whether I am going a bit mad and this is a bit strange. And I think that's the pattern all the time in the Bible, because these people are ordinary people just like us. They're not sort of superheroes who always say yes to God because they're far better than us and all that sort of thing. I don't think that's right. I think that, Mary went to see Elizabeth. And like you said earlier, it's only when she meets Elizabeth that both of them realise the enormity of what's actually happening and that the promise has happened, And I think that's more real than, Victorianized Basque folk songs,
I also like the fact that there was a very special Christmas compilation, it was called, an album of Christmas songs put together back in the 80s, and Sting recorded the Angel Gabriel on that. And he did. I remember it vaguely. I was very young, obviously, but in the last verse it says, and Christian folk throughout the world will ever say, most highly favoured lady, and he changed that word to, and everyone throughout the world will ever say, most highly favoured lady. And I thought that was a really really good theological change, actually, because, you know, Mary did say yes for everybody and not just for people who believe in Christ.
Yeah, and that's actually that's yeah. So Sting's not a bad theologian on the quiet when he's not hanging around
Absolutely.
with various people. Like, yeah, I thought about that. No, I didn't know that. That's interesting. But really, what Mary does in saying yes to God is fulfill that promise made in Genesis, where God says to Mary about the serpent that she will strike the head of the serpent, so she will defeat all evil. And in saying yes to God, she defeats all evil because she says yes on behalf of everybody. And that's the amazing thing, is because Mary, in a sense, is the first Christian, really, in that sort of sense. We can say yes to God too. So if we say yes to God, then Jesus can be born inside us. So it's our mission as Christian people is to respond to God's invitation. So it's not that it's God who always takes the initiative and comes to find us. We don't go looking for him. He turns up and says, would you like me to be born inside you? And we, like Mary, can say yes, but we don't say yes straight away. We're usually a bit more like Mary. We say yes a bit and then go and check it out and then say big yes.
Absolutely. And so in that way, she's just entirely human like the rest of us, isn't she?
Yeah.
And there's that talk, isn't there, when people say, I wonder how many people God asked before Mary said yes.
Yeah.
You know, were there others, you know, who said, well, you must be joking, not me, mate, you know.
Or thought they'd had a bit too much to drink the night before or something, innit? You know, so you know, so we don't remember Carol and, you know, and Sarah and all the rest of them who all said, well, not really, like, you know. And I suppose that's the other thing, is that God primarily works through us when we say yes. So he works in cooperation with us. He doesn't magic things into existence. He doesn't magic things better. He, most of the time, works in cooperation with us. So in saying yes to God, we transform the world, because that's his plan. That's his will, to transform the world, not for us, but with us. And I think that's
absolutely, yeah.
You know, so that's why I like the hymn, the Carol or Angel Gabriel, to be fair. So I like the tune, but I'm not really.
I like the tune too.
Yeah, I'm not that keen on the theology, but moving swiftly on.
You know what though? I think we do need a bit of sugar in our lives, don't we? And so the Angel Gabriel, you know, it is telling the story. It is a bit sugar-coated, but I don't know. You know, if you read the reading, you know, poor Mary just saying she was greatly troubled, you know, that kind of fits in, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm not going to try and pronounce the Greek word, but yeah, that's what it means, is gut-wrenching. I like that. So the next one is the journey to Bethlehem and the birth. And I always hate this reading because it's like 7 verses or something, or 8 verses, and it's so much packed in there. There's so much of a story, and it's just kind of like blanked over like dead quick. So, you know, if you imagine, you know, you're up in Nazareth, you've already had this trauma from Joseph's point of view, I suppose. You're engaged, the woman you engaged to has, you know, decided to get pregnant and you didn't know anything about it. And then you've kind of made up with her because the angel come to see you and said it was all right. So you're just about getting over that. And then you get told that you've got to go and register your land for taxation. So the background to this is Joseph had to go to Bethlehem because that's where his family's land was. And he had to go there to register that the land belonged to him, basically. So that's why he had to make a journey. And this sort of thing used to happen every, say, 30 odd years, 40 odd years, when there was a kind of new emperor, that type of thing. They had to do this sort of thing. So, but if you think about it, is it 80 miles you say earlier? between
Yeah, that is about 70 miles. And I was thinking about this because, as you say, when I read through this reading, I almost missed the birth, because the birth, it just says she gave birth, basically. And there's so much more to that story. If you think about the journey, first of all, Mary's having a baby, which isn't Joseph's. And Joseph, although they might have made up, it might have been a bit awkward. Can you imagine having a blazing row with your wife, and her having done something really wrong, or you maybe having done something really wrong, and then having to sit in a car with them for 70 miles? And that's quite tough, isn't it? And these 70 miles wouldn't have been done fast. They would have been walking or on a donkey. And she was really pregnant. And when I was pregnant with my children, I really didn't want to walk very far at all, or sometimes do very much at all, because I was so tired all the time. And that must have just been exhausting for them. They must have been tired. They must have been irritable without being pregnant. So that journey must have been really tough, I reckon.
And it's dangerous as well, isn't it? That's the other thing is, I often think of, I'm a big fan of Walking Dead, the zombie program. And in that, it's basically because society's collapsed and the zombies have taken over. There's no police. So it's a really wild sort of place because there's no police, there's no law. Basically, those who have the guns or the power or the strength will and do sort of like pick on the weak and rob people and all that. And it's a really dangerous place. And that's what the ancient world was like a lot of the time on these roads. You couldn't phone the cops and say, oh, someone's come to rob me. Oh, there's some people there. So it was, traveling was extremely dangerous, especially on those roads. So,
we hear about that in the Good Samaritan story that's told later in the New Testament, don't we? Where, there was a man travelling along. He was travelling on his own. It was really dangerous. It wouldn't have been unusual for somebody to be beaten up and robbed. And that's why people didn't stop, because they were fearing for their lives and, that they might be jumped upon as well. And also, the other thing is, they wouldn't have had lovely paths. It wouldn't be like a walk in Battles Park or anything. Would have been really slippery underfoot. It would have been uneven. It would have been hot, I expect. It just wouldn't have been a pleasant journey at all.
No, and so what amazes me really with the Christmas story is we have sugar-coated it so much, and like Away in a Manger is the ultimate sugar-coated carol, really, isn't it? I've had two kids, and they're never that quiet, and no crying they make. Like when I was a kid, I used to sing that, and after I had my own children, I was like, this is nonsense. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely.
Kids do not, I don't care if they're Jesus or not, like they still get up in the night, it's just the reality. But I think even at the beginning of Jesus' life, before he's born, he's suffering, and the people around him are suffering, and they're really a family in crisis, aren't they? That's the thing.
Absolutely, they're refugees, really, aren't they?
Yeah.
They've got nowhere to stay once they get to Bethlehem. Now, was that because they had been shunned by the family? Was it because they just arrived there really late? Maybe they took so long getting there on that journey. As we said, it must have been tough doing 70 miles when you're pregnant. Maybe they just took ages, and they got there and there wasn't anywhere to stay as such. And so he was born in really humble beginnings. He wasn't, and who knows? We don't know whether there was a local midwife who came in, or someone from next door, a woman who came in and helped Mary, or whether she was there on her own. It must have been really scary.
Don't leave it to Joseph, like.
Wow. Well, if you think about it, whilst today you were there, you said, at your children's births, I mean, back then they wouldn't have been allowed anywhere near. So was Mary on her own? Or did she have help? Or did he actually have to go against everything that has ever been and be there and help her?
Yeah, and I think it's to do with, like, it was 36 hours, I think, for Andrew. It's like the day and a half, it doesn't happen. But like on the films, I remember I was really shocked. This sounds really stupid now, doesn't it? But I was really shocked because every film, the baby's born like straight away, don't they? Do you know what I mean? And I thought, oh, it can't go on that long, like, 36 hours later. And I was just watching, in fairness, being supportive. But that's the thing. It's not a straightforward thing. It's very dangerous. And as well, they're not even inside, well, they're in a kind of, the stable really is kind of like the back room of someone's house, really. It's that sort of thing. It's kind of, it's almost like the equivalent today would be a garage, that sort of thing. It's a kind of outside room where the animals were and things like that. So it's not a nice place. It's not hygienic for a start, let's be honest. It's highly dangerous from a health point of view. But I think that's the thing is, if we think about it, is why the carols and the Christmas story sometimes is so sugar-coated is because it's too real for us.
Yeah.
Because it goes right to the heart of our human experience. Because we've all been born. We've all had that experience of being born. We've all sort of... And he's born in such a traumatic way with the poorest of the poor. And that's not the God we like, we're comfortable with. We're more comfortable with the magic God who's going to come down and sort everything out, or the all-powerful God who sorts stuff out and blasts people, or the nice cuddly God who's very nice to us and all of that. But that's not what this is about at all. It's about God joining us in our suffering. Is, you say, how can God understand how we live or what's happening in my life? But I think it's only when you understand the trauma that God goes through all the way through the gospel that you realize he does understand, because he's actually lived it.
Yeah, I mean, that's why Jesus was born. It was so that he could understand us. That's why he became fully human and fully God, so that he could weep with us, so that he could eat and walk and talk with us. And the fact that this is such a messy birth, well, life is messy, isn't it, actually? Life isn't all carols and loveliness. And I am sure there are people who did have a lovely baby who was born just perfectly and didn't cry. But that's not the normal. And so in order to be normal, this had to happen, didn't it?
Yeah. And I think as well, we can take a lot from that, especially in the kind of COVID times, is that, God's answer to the predicament we're in is to be with us because he understands, because he's been there too. I often say to people at Christmas, when you do funerals or things go wrong at Christmas, people are always surprised that I do funerals at Christmas. I always find that funny. People say like, oh, but it's Christmas. I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't stop bad things happening. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Life and death still happens.
Yeah, you don't take, it's like COVID. You don't take a day off for Christmas, does it? So I think the thing is that I often say to people, I say, yeah, but Christmas isn't about making the perfect day. And if we think about the first Christmas, it's horrifying. So no matter how bad your Christmas can be, it won't be as bad as Jesus's first one. And that's the point, is that we have these John Lewis adverts that say that Christmas is about being perfect and having the perfect family, having the perfect time with your perfect air, with your perfect table and all the rest of it. And that's the opposite of what Christianity is about, the opposite of the Christian Christmas. The joy of the Christian Christmas is that Jesus joins us in the mess. He joins us in the anti-John Lewis day where things are far from perfect. So I hate John Lewis adverts because they're the opposite, but there you go. And people feel bad then that their Christmas isn't like the adverts. It isn't perfect, and that's a lot of pressure. So
there is a lot of pressure, isn't there? And to make it all right. And as you say, Jesus's first Christmas was messy, but let's not forget whose story this begins with. And this is Mary's first Christmas as a mum, isn't it? And her day must have been, well, astounding. And as the story unfolds, she must have just been bewildered most of the time.
Yeah, she didn't have one of those baby grows that says baby's first Christmas on it, or like reindeer ears that you can buy or anything like that. So, it's not like that at all. But that's the thing is, maybe this year, that's the thing we can get greatest joy from really at Christmas, is that Christmas isn't about perfection. It's about imperfection. And it's about God joining us in the mess, and joining us in all our muckiness, really. And I suppose when you try and make something perfect, it always goes wrong. And
really stressful, isn't it? Trying to have the perfect Christmas.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And you always think everybody else is having more fun than you. So I think I've given up on that now. I think if you're clergy, you can't, because you're always working at Christmas, you can't really do the kind of secular Christmas, the kind of like, John Lewis Christmas. You can't do it. I tried a couple of times when I was a curate, but that was a massive fail. So now we had macaroni cheese for Christmas dinner last year.
Oh, my favourite.
Yeah, we just don't bother with that because it's not real. And I think the reality of Christmas is Jesus being born to live alongside us. And I think celebrating that and celebrating the imperfections of family life and the imperfections of humanity, and that Jesus came to be with us, even though we're just messed up sometimes.
I think going back to Away in the Manger, apparently the first two verses were written long before the last verse.
Is this going to be the Victorians again?
It's written by somebody else. Well, you know how it is. So the last verse is a prayer. Be near me, Lord Jesus, I ask thee to stay. And that is our prayer, isn't it? To just keep us safe and to be near us and to bless us. And at the end, so that we can be with you, Lord Jesus. And that's the bit of prayer, the carol that I really like, is that prayer at the end.
Yeah. And I think that is the thing at the end of it, is actually where it says, be near me, Lord Jesus, is Jesus can be near us because he understands us, because he's been there too. And that's the deep and true joy of Christmas.
Yeah.
So thanks for having a chat today. I hope everyone's found that helpful or useful in thinking about it. I hope we haven't sort of really dissed the carols too much this week. Sorry about that. So I get loads of complaints now about that.
Oh, we do love singing them, though. We do love singing them.
I do love singing them. Yeah, I'll say that. and I'm pleased, as it's always good to do a podcast like this with a woman who's had children, because if it was me and Justin or me and Ian, it would be really awkward talking about these things. We get lots more complaints. So we'll see you throughout the week. We've got readings and carols and another podcast coming out next week. So please keep up with the daily comfort and joy content, and we'll see you next week.
Oh, tidings of comfort and joy.